The theater of galactic peace smelled like burnt ozone, fermented fish oil, and the inside of a malfunctioning airlock. It was the kind of odor that clung to your clothes and your diplomatic career. 25,000 beings packed into the tiered balconies of the Varelian arena, every species humming, squawking, vibrating, or doing something else unpleasant in anticipation. Some levitated. Others drooled. One particularly enthusiastic Maluvian ambassador molted from sheer excitement. And yet, despite the chaos, all eyes, or their local equivalent, were focused on the center of the arena, a blood-stained hexagonal platform suspended in an anti-gravity field, rotating slowly like an offering platter for the gods of irony. It was, officially, a venue of arbitration. Unofficially, it was televised death with subtitles and sponsorships. The Ktharn Dominion had arrived dressed for victory. Armored priests chanted the names of conquests past, while their champion, General Durovarn the Butcher of Nebulax 7, stood at attention, all 7 meters of iridescent scale and brute conviction. He didn't blink. Mostly because his species lacked eyelids, but the effect was still impressive. Across the platform, a single doorway remained sealed. It had been that way for 7 minutes, and the audience had begun to buzz with speculative commentary. Was the human challenger still in transit? Had Earth sent a diplomat by mistake? Was this another psychological tactic, the legendary human delay offense? They had reason to laugh. Earth was new to the interstellar scene. Too eager, too polite, and, most damning, too organic. Their ships were clunky, their language primitive, and their soldiers had the nerve to bleed when injured. Other species found this theatrical, if slightly embarrassing. Above it all, the announcer, a four-throated Telemari broadcaster suspended in a vibrating orb of sound gel, crooned through every channel simultaneously. And now, dear sentients and noble parasites, we welcome Earth's offering to the 9th iteration of the Intergalactic Arbitration Showcase. Presenting an unmodified Terran female, standard height, standard weight, and allegedly housebroken, Sergeant Ellie Vance. The door opened. No drums. No explosions. Just a woman in a faded brown flight suit, boots that squeaked with every step, and a single braid down her left shoulder like a rope dangling from a sinking ship. She didn't wave. Didn't bow. Just looked up once, as if scanning wind direction, though there was no wind in a vacuum-sealed arena. The laughter started on the upper tiers, mostly from the gelatinous delegates of the Slorvian Pact, who jiggled when amused. Then the chuckles filtered down to the central rings, where the betting species held sway. The odds had been set days ago, 143,000 to 1 in favor of Durovarn. One Grell merchant had allegedly bet an entire moon on the Ktharn. Bad investment, but good theater. Ellie ignored them. Her gaze slid past the cameras, the counselors, the betting drones hovering like metallic vultures. She assessed the angles of the platforms, the reflectivity of the polished floor, the position of the external lighting rig. Her fingers twitched once, subtly. Someone in the second balcony, a Kravaxian war historian, noticed and muttered, "That's a sniper's calibration twitch." Beside Durovarn, a Ktharn scribe unrolled a parchment made from the skin of something intelligent. The general's introduction lasted nearly 5 minutes, listing his campaigns, planetary devastations, and one famous duel where he crushed a cyborg skull with his jaw. When it was over, the Telemari announcer paused as if unsure the human had earned an introduction at all. Ellie blinked. Then spoke, voice dry as Martian dust. "Hi." A ripple of confusion spread across the arena. Several telepaths attempted to probe her mind and recoiled immediately. One Vixari commentator shrieked, "There's static. Only static and math." Durovarn stepped forward, claws gleaming. "You insult this arena with your weakness," he growled, his voice modulated to 12 frequencies for maximum intimidation. "Do you truly believe your kind has a place among warriors?" Ellie glanced up. "Not really," she said, tone flat. "But snipers usually aren't sent where they belong. Just where they're needed." More laughter. More disgust. The Galactic Council representatives exchanged diplomatic sighs and prepared condolence statements. The human ambassador slouched in her viewing box, face-palming so hard her translator chip buzzed. The arena shifted. Gravity recalibrated to Ctharn preference, 1.7 Terran standard. Oxygen dropped by 40%. Temperature spiked. Atmospheric dampeners disengaged with a hiss. Ellie swayed once. Barely. Her boots squeaked again. Weapons were summoned, an ancient arena tradition. The butcher was granted his ancestral cleaver, a slab of neutron-forged metal laced with poisoned bone. Ellie was offered a rifle that looked like it had been dug out of a museum exhibit on primitive warfare. She took it with one hand, popped the magazine, counted the rounds, adjusted the scope that wasn't there. Dro Varn snarled. "You will not suffer long, human." "I was hoping to be disappointed," she replied. The arena dimmed. Thousands of lights retracted into the ceiling like wary insects. Only the center platform remained illuminated, harsh and white, casting both combatants in long, distorted shadows. A silent countdown began. No fanfare. Just the ticking of inevitability. Ellie closed one eye, lowered the rifle, bent one knee as if to pray. But she didn't pray. She calculated. Light angles. Rebound trajectories. Heat distortion off Dro Varn's armor. Spectator movement. Possible structural weaknesses in the dome. The numbers danced. Spun. Aligned. "On one!" the crowd screamed. Dro Varn surged forward. Ellie didn't move. Because the bullet was already in the chamber. And physics had already made its decision. She exhaled. One slow, complete breath. Then everything else started moving too fast. The first bullet was never meant to kill. It sang overhead, ricocheting off a reflector panel mounted far above the arena platform. A small, unremarkable sound, just a whisper of kinetic disobedience. To most of the audience, it registered as a misfire, a rookie's panic shot. But to Sergeant Ellie Vance, it was the opening chord in a symphony only she could hear. The note curved, bent, redirected. It was a message in metal. And General Dro Varn had missed it. He thundered forward, his cleaver held like a judge's gavel mid-sentence. Each step cracked the arena plating, sending microshocks through the anti-grav field. His body gleamed with ceremonial ichor. The crowd roared in approval. Ellie simply sidestepped. A single breath. Her movements were neither rushed nor hesitant. They were deliberate in a way that unnerved anyone watching closely enough. There was no flourish. No defiance. Just efficiency so sharp it was mistaken for apathy. Inside her mind, a different battle played out. She calculated velocity drops based on oxygen density. Assessed sweat evaporation on the general's chest plates. Noted the subtle hitch in his left leg, scar tissue buildup from a previous wound, perhaps. Not fatal, but exploitable. Ellie had been underestimated before. At 19, she dropped into the sulfur fields of Titan without air support. At 22, she'd held a ridge on Europa with one arm in a sling and a jammed railgun. At 27, she'd left the military with honors, a hollowed-out sense of pride, and enough classified operations under her belt to make an intelligence agent twitch. She didn't talk about any of it. Not because it was secret. Because it didn't matter anymore. They always laughed, these aliens. Laughed at human tactics. At their over-reliance on instinct, emotion, narrative. Ellie had heard the jokes while she patched up her wounds, while her comrades were counted in pieces. The humor never reached her. She stored it like coordinates. Dro Varn lunged again. She fired. Another ricochet, this time deliberate, off a polished pillar behind him. He roared, mistaking the near miss for cowardice. She counted to 3. The third bullet shattered the light fixture above the Ctharn general. Dust and sparks rained over his left flank, blinding him for half a second. Not enough to win. Just enough to see. Ellie's voice, calm and low, cracked across the arena's private comlink, one she'd sliced into 2 hours before the match began. Your armor vents from the back. Quadrant C, 7. I could have taken the shot already. You're lucky I'm patient. There was silence. Then a pulse of untranslatable rage from the Ctharn. He charged again. The general wasn't a fool. But he was angry, and anger made even the clever predictable. That was the thing about tactics. You didn't need more strength. You just needed fewer surprises on your side of the board. Ellie wasn't the strongest, wasn't the fastest. She wasn't genetically modified, cybernetically enhanced, or spiritually attuned to any ancient Martian war gods. She just saw things the rest didn't. She fired again. A spark burst near the general's knee. He stumbled, growled, regained balance, too proud to acknowledge the limp. Above them, commentary buzzed in delayed translation. The Terran appears to be improvising. Is this a cultural thing? Is she toying with him? Or does she simply have no plan whatsoever? In the human booth, the ambassador winced. She always has a plan, she whispered, to no one in particular. You just see it when it's too late. The rifle Ellie held had once belonged to a museum exhibit. It was stripped of enhancements, scope cracked, stock too short. It didn't matter. Her real weapon had never been the rifle. It was timing. It was pressure. It was patience wielded like a knife. Her eyes locked onto Durvan's. Predictable, she murmured. He lunged again, this time feinting left. She didn't move. Instead, she aimed a fraction higher than his center mass and fired. The bullet whined. It struck the same pillar she'd hit earlier. The ricochet sang sideways, then hit the base of a gravity stabilizer, which sparked and lurched. Suddenly, the arena tilted. Just a few degrees. Enough for someone overbalanced to fall. Dro Varn faltered, cleaver swinging wide. She stepped forward. Beginner's luck? He hissed, spittle spraying. No, Ellie said, leveling the rifle directly at his jaw. Pattern recognition. She pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. He smiled. She tossed the rifle, unslinging a small, ugly sidearm from her thigh holster, a mechanical antique that would have made any modern soldier cringe. He laughed. Then she fired. The shot landed in the center of Durovarn's chest, not powerful enough to penetrate his ceremonial armor, but strong enough to activate the chemical residue from the earlier bullet fragments, now coating quadrant C7. The compound combusted. The explosion was small, contained, but enough to launch the general 10 meters backward. He slammed into the arena's boundary field and dropped like a sack of radiation. Ellie exhaled. She didn't celebrate, didn't pose. She just knelt to pick up her rifle, checked the chamber again, and wiped the dust from the scopeless frame with the cuff of her sleeve. Silence blanketed the arena. Even the betting bots had stopped processing. A child from the upper rows gasped, a sound that echoed like thunder in the vacuum of disbelief. Ellie looked up at the nearest drone camera. I told you, she said, voice flat. I was hoping to be disappointed. And then she walked off the platform, one boot squeaking with each step. The arena reset itself with bureaucratic precision. Platforms rotated back into place, scorch marks were sealed beneath self-healing nanopolymer flooring, and the air scrubbers went to war against the smell of singed scale and burnt pride. Somewhere, a cleaning drone beeped in protest as it rolled past a smoldering patch of arena wall, its synthetic voice muttering obscenities in binary 8. General Dro Varn had been carried out on a levitation stretcher, still breathing but thoroughly unconscious. Medical scans projected above his crumpled form showed no permanent damage, just a shattered ego and light spinal trauma. The kind that could heal. The kind that shouldn't have happened in front of 57 billion viewers. Ellie Vance stood in the prep chamber once more, leaning against a rust-colored wall that vibrated with the residual hum of galactic attention. Her expression hadn't changed. It rarely did. She was polishing the sidearm she'd used for the final shot, not because it needed it, but because it gave her hand something to do. 2 Terran aides fluttered around her like caffeinated birds. One tried to offer her a protein bar. The other tried to translate her last match into a press release. She ignored them both. The lights dimmed. Again. A second match had been called. This was irregular. It wasn't supposed to happen. But the Ktharn delegation had filed an immediate appeal for a rematch, citing arena sabotage, ambiguous tactics, and the emotional compromise of a female opponent. The Galactic Council, eager to avoid another war, approved the rematch. Ellie didn't object. She just asked what the gravity setting would be. Maximum, one aide muttered. Of course, she said. In the crowd above, betting windows reopened. The odds shifted, less dramatically this time, but still stacked against her. Only 72 to 1 now. Someone had clearly been paying attention. Her next opponent was introduced as Vrothka, a dual-certified champion from the Trinkel Empire, genetically bred for ambidextrous swordplay in multi-axis combat. Vrothka didn't have a neck so much as a cluster of tendrils supporting a vertical row of eyes. He saluted with all 4 arms. It looked impressive unless you understood body mechanics. Ellie did. She stepped back onto the platform. The air was heavier now, thicker, like syrup poured through a filter. The arena climate had shifted again. This time to match the Trinkel homeworld. 3.1 Earth gravities, methane-rich atmosphere, visibility just under 40% due to intentional atmospheric haze. The announcer didn't bother with pleasantries. The human returns. Possibly suicidal. Possibly brilliant. We're about to find out. Ellie inhaled once. Her lungs burned, but her expression didn't change. The sidearm was still holstered. No rifle. No body armor. Her sleeves were rolled up like she was here to fix a leak, not fight for diplomatic survival. Vrothka lunged forward with a whir of bone blades and high-pitched shrieks that sent several species into instinctual hiding. The air shimmered with his speed. Ellie dropped flat. Not fell, dropped. Voluntarily. As if gravity had flipped a switch and she'd simply obeyed. Her body hit the ground before his blades could triangulate her coordinates. From the sidelines, commentators murmured in confusion. She's surrendering? No, she's calculating. Calculating what? A pause. Airflow. Because what Vrothka hadn't noticed, what almost no one noticed, was the ripple effect caused by his own charge. 4 limbs meant 4 entry points. 4 separate pressure displacements. In a methane-rich environment, airflow distortion was twice as visible, but only to those still enough to see it. Ellie was still. When Vrothka doubled back for a strike, she rolled once, let his leftmost foot blade strike the platform, and then twisted, pushing off the exact same spot he'd just weakened. The surface cracked, redirecting the force of his own momentum back into his hip joint. He faltered. Just slightly. But slightly was all she ever needed. She pivoted, using her own momentum to vault upward. Not high, not far, just enough to land behind him. Her hand went to her belt, not for a weapon, but for a capsule no bigger than a fingernail. She crushed it against the arena floor. A sharp, high-pitched whine. Then, silence. For 3 seconds, every sound dampened. Every weapon with a sonic chip overloaded. Vrothka's auditory sensors scrambled. He staggered, momentarily deaf and off balance. Ellie didn't attack. She waited, then moved. Her fingers darted to the sidearm. Not to fire, but to aim. A single click, and the chamber rotated into manual load. The announcer gasped. She's switching to ballistic mode. Primitive. Risky. Effective. Ellie muttered to herself, just loud enough for her opponent to hear. You're faster. Stronger. More evolved. That's your mistake. Vrothka swung. She ducked under the arc fired point-blank into the arena floor again. Not at him. At the stabilizer beneath his feet. The blast ruptured the surface in a perfect circle. Vrothka's footing disintegrated. He dropped into the exposed compartment below, tangled in cabling and coolant lines. Disoriented. Furious. She followed, stepping down into the darkness with unnerving calm. The broadcast tried to follow but lost visual. When the feed reconnected, Ellie was alone, standing above the compartment's edge, brushing dust from her shoulders. The audience stared. No body. No scream. Just the silence of implication. The referee drone zipped toward her. Was lethal force used? Nope, Ellie replied. He's breathing. Might wish he wasn't. The drone hesitated, consulted the rulebook, and then lit green. Victory confirmed. The arena went quiet, then louder than before. Not laughter, not disbelief, respect. In the control rooms above, galactic envoys panicked in hushed tones. She wasn't supposed to win twice. A fluke could be explained. A trend could not. War was avoidable. But panic was contagious. Back in the prep chamber, Ellie sat again, sipping recycled water, arms crossed, head tilted toward the screen, replaying her moves in reverse. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She was listening. And somewhere behind her eyes, the next angle was already forming. The diplomatic chambers of the Galactic Council were not built for emergencies. They were built for posturing, long speeches, and the ceremonial passing of accountability. But on that day, they buzzed with something dangerously close to urgency. 1,000 species gathered behind translucent barriers and translation membranes, their representatives flaring gills, blinking asynchronously, clicking nervous mandibles. What had begun as a routine arbitration between the Ktharn Dominion and Terran interests had become something else. The footage was still being replayed in slow, humiliating detail. Not just once, but dissected by species-specific analysts, each frame annotated with failure metrics. General Dro Varn downed by a ricochet equation. Vrothka defeated in his own gravitational element. And in both instances, the human never raised her voice. Never shouted. Never smiled. The quiet ones always caused the most damage. On a diplomatic stream with restricted clearance, an emergency council convened. A gelatinous delegate from the Slorvian bloc shivered audibly. We must reclassify human strategic capacity. Immediately. From nuisance to what? Asked a crystalline ambassador from the Loratech Continuum. A sentient mist from the Veil colonies swirled. To apex threat. Impossible, the Ktharn envoy spat. They're underdeveloped. Lacking neural enhancements, collective minds, internal weaponry. They have patience, came a flat voice from the far end of the chamber. Everyone turned. The Terran representative had finally arrived. A lean, gray-haired diplomat named Rhys Danner. He hadn't spoken much since arriving 3 weeks ago, largely dismissed as an observer in ill-fitting robes. Now he stood, arms behind his back, the image of calm authority. They've always had patience, Danner said softly. That's what frightens you, isn't it? Not the bullets, not the blood, but the fact that she waited until you looked away. Across the stars, in a much quieter place, Ellie Vance sat alone aboard a Terran transport cruiser. The chair beneath her creaked. The lights above hummed. She had one boot propped on the console and a lukewarm cup of something meant to resemble coffee. She wasn't watching the news feeds. She didn't need to. The Council's reaction was predictable. Scramble the diplomats, alter the treaties, adjust the narrative. Pretend Earth had somehow manipulated events unfairly, as if skill and restraint were cheating. Outside her viewport, stars stretched like streaks of wet paint across a dark canvas. Faster-than-light travel made everything look poetic. But Ellie wasn't in the mood for poetry. She was reviewing match footage, hers and everyone else's. Frame by frame. She studied not the kills, but the moments just before. The micro-movements. The hesitations. The assumptions. You could learn everything you needed to know about someone in the half-second they believed they'd already won. Her comm pinged. A secure line. Vance, came the gravelly voice of Admiral Keen. You just unbalanced half the galaxy. Ellie didn't blink. They were never balanced to begin with. Be that as it may, he sighed. They're scared now. Really scared. Which means they'll start making mistakes. I hope so. We might need you again. She looked out the viewport. I didn't leave for them. Keen was silent for a long beat. You left because you thought we were becoming like them. No, she said. I left because they thought we weren't. The call ended without formality. That was how they did things now. Fast, clipped, unsentimental. Ellie leaned back. Somewhere in the distance, a new arena would rise. New champions would be trained. New tactics would be studied. But some things couldn't be replicated. You couldn't program caution into arrogance. You couldn't upgrade humility into beings designed to dominate. And you couldn't unsee what the galaxy had seen that day. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a small data chip, and slotted it into the console. The ship adjusted course silently, a redirection so minor it didn't even register on civilian trackers. Destination: classified. Her boots squeaked once as she stood. Back on the council floor, a final statement was being drafted. Not a declaration of war. Not an apology. Something safer. Vague. A resolution to form a subcommittee on Terran conflict methodology. But across the outer colonies, word spread faster than protocol. They called her the equation of silence. The whisper shot. The still flame. Not hero. Not monster. Something else. In alleyways and war rooms, species that had mocked humanity began rewriting their doctrines. They studied ballistics. They dusted off their own ancient texts on patience and foresight. They remembered, with uneasy clarity, that evolution did not guarantee supremacy. A predator doesn't need to roar. It just needs to watch. And wait. Ellie Vance was watching. And the galaxy, now, was listening.